You know, every language has a story, but the story of English, it's a real epic. I mean, it's a classic underdog tale, a language of the common folk that clawed its way up from the sidelines to become this incredible literary powerhouse. And right at the center of that whole story, you'll find one man.
So let's just jump right in. How on earth does one person get a title like the father of English literature? It sounds huge, right? Well, that's the big question we're going to unpack. And I promise you, the answer will completely change the way you think about the language you're hearing right now. But first, to really get what Chaucer did, we need to rewind. We have to go back to his world, to 14th century England. And back then, English, well, it was a second-class language. It was nowhere near the top of the linguistic food chain. Yeah, take a look at this. This slide lays out the massive linguistic divide in medieval England. See, after the Normans invaded in 1066, they set up this really strict hierarchy. Up top, you had Latin and Norman French. That was the language of power for the courts, the church, and any important writing. And way down at the bottom, that's where you'd find English, or as we call it, Middle English. It was the language of the streets, the farms, seen as kind of common, not very sophisticated. Okay, so let's try a little active recall. I want you to think about that for a second. You've got this Germanic, Anglo-Saxon foundation, and then you just pour in a flood of new words from Norman French. What do you end up with? I'll give you a few seconds. You get Middle English, the super flexible, lively, and constantly evolving language of the people. So we've got this underdog language, Middle English, just kind of doing its thing and developing its own unique vibe. But at the same time, the whole world was right on the edge of some massive changes. A perfect storm of new ideas and new tech was brewing, and it created the perfect opportunity for English to finally take center stage. And here's a key concept for this whole story: the vernacular. All this means is the language that regular, ordinary people actually speak day to day. The idea of using the vernacular, the common tongue, for art and literature was totally revolutionary. It was like taking knowledge that was locked away by the elite and handing it over to everyone. Definitely keep that word, vernacular, in your back pocket.
So, what was fueling all this change? It was basically three main things coming together at once. And here's a little trick to remember them. Just think PHP. The first P is for the printing press, which suddenly made books way cheaper and easier to get. That was supercharged by H for humanism, this new way of thinking that celebrated human experiences and made people hungry for new stories. And finally, the second P is for patronage, because rich royals started funding artists and writers who were working in English.
And this movement went way beyond just books. The Renaissance was this incredible explosion of new ideas in science and philosophy and exploration. People's whole worldview was expanding, and they wanted art and stories that actually reflected this exciting, changing world. The ground was perfectly fertile for a literary revolution.
Okay, before we bring our main character into the story, let's do a quick memory check, just to make sure those key ideas are really locked in.
All right, remember our little mnemonic, PHP? The engine of the English Renaissance was the printing press, the intellectual spark of humanism, and the financial backing from royal patronage. Got it? Awesome.
So, into this perfect storm of change steps a writer who looked at the common English language and saw its incredible, untapped potential. It's time to meet the hero of our story, Geoffrey Chaucer. And believe me, that title is not an exaggeration. His work marks the exact turning point, the moment English transformed from just a spoken language into a language that could create profound, lasting works of art.
And here is the absolute crux of it all. Chaucer made a choice that was, for his time, totally radical. Instead of writing in fancy Latin or French to get praise from the elite, he chose to write in Middle English. He picked the language of the masses, and in doing that, he basically bet everything on its future.
And if he was betting big on English, his masterpiece, the Canterbury Tales, was the ultimate winning hand. This book was the final definitive proof that English wasn't just a language for getting things done. It could be beautiful, it could be complicated, and it could be absolutely brilliant.
The whole setup is just genius in its simplicity. You get this random group of people from every corner of society, a knight, a miller, a nun, a cook, and they're all on a pilgrimage. To kill time on the road, they decide to have a storytelling contest. It's such a simple frame, but it's a stroke of absolute genius.
Hey, remember that word, vernacular? Well, this is where it comes back in a huge way. By writing this incredible work in the everyday language of the people, Chaucer blew the doors of literature clean off their hinges.
For the very first time, great stories weren't just for the super-educated elite, they were for everybody. He democratized literature.
And these points here really show you why it's a masterpiece. The Canterbury Tales is like a perfect snapshot of his entire world. The characters feel so real. They're flawed, they're funny, they're relatable. But the most important thing he did was show that the English language could handle the full spectrum of human life, from the holy to the hilarious, from elegant poetry to dirty jokes. Before him, people thought only Latin or French could do that.
But Chaucer's impact is so much bigger than just one amazing book. He completely changed the game for the English language. He built the very foundation that future literary giants would build their entire careers on.
You can see the direct line of influence right here. In the 14th century, Chaucer proves English can be a language of art. Fast forward a bit, and by the 16th and 17th centuries, you've got writers like Spenser and Marlowe following his lead. And then, of course, comes William Shakespeare, who takes the language that Chaucer made legitimate and just launches it into the stratosphere.
So, what's the ultimate takeaway here? It's this. Chaucer gave English its credibility. He proved it could be a powerful, flexible, and beautiful tool for telling human stories. He showed it could do comedy, tragedies, satire, romance, the whole shebang, and that gave every writer who came after him the confidence to use their own language to create masterpieces.
And that leaves us with one last really fascinating question to chew on. If Geoffrey Chaucer had just played it safe, if he'd written in Latin or French, like everyone expected, would the English literary tradition have ever even gotten off the ground? Could a world without Chaucer's bold choice be a world without Shakespeare? It's a powerful thought and a pretty great place to end.